This week on the ZD podcast, I'm speaking to Jamie Pujara. Oh my goodness, where to start my story with Jamie? So last year, which some of you may know and maybe a lot of you don't know, is I participated in the Antler program, which was amazing. And this is where I met Jamie. And by the end of the program, Jamie was that person that I had connected with as a potential co-founder, as someone that I would work with in business, and I just admire all around. So Jamie has been in business for a long time. He is the definition of seasoned entrepreneur, and he's famous in the tech startup community because of his amazing journey building up Buy Rent Kenya, which many of you I believe know, and then not just building it, growing it and scaling it rapidly in a short amount of time, but also being able to exit. You know, that exit is something that I don't know if even many of us grasp or understand, that really when you build a successful business and then you find a great exit, it's called what, the peak of the mountain that many of us are aspiring to. So Jamie is not just a serial entrepreneur. With Buy Rent Kenya, he raised 2 rounds of funding and scaled the company to be the #1 property portal and successfully exited. We know that. However, what many of us may not know is he has been nominated as one of Kenya's top 40 under 40 businessmen. He was on the list in 2015, and he was included on the Forbes list of 30 most promising young entrepreneurs in Africa, 2016 and 2017. Wait, I'm telling you, how many of us have this kind of accolades? And that is not the end. The most interesting thing, and something also amazing that Jamie humbly doesn't even talk about, but to me is just quite an important achievement as well, is that he's not just a member, but he's a global leader of the Entrepreneurs Organization, also known as EO. Now, EO is a high-quality support network of 14,000 plus like-minded leaders across 61 countries, and he has previously served as president of EO Kenya, and now he serves as the regional chair for the Middle East, Pakistan, and Africa region. Trust me, isn't this someone that we want to learn from? I am so excited. I've been working with Jamie as an advisor and a guide and someone that I'm leaning on now as I grow as an entrepreneur in my business. And I'm so excited that you also have the opportunity to hear from him and hear some of his nuggets around surviving 2020. Hi, Jamie. Thank you for agreeing to be part of our podcast episode. And you're actually our first guest for 2021, which is awesome.
Awesome.
So good karma for you, you know?
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and really excited to be doing this with you.
Cool. So we'll just jump into it because of the time, and we want to get to the good stuff. I guess you can start with a quick intro. Talk about who you are and what your entrepreneurship journey has been like, how long you've been in business. So tell us about yourself,
Sure. So my name is Jamie Pujara. I'm born and raised here in Kenya. My entrepreneurship journey, I think it probably started later than usual. I think after university, I was really trying to find myself, and I did a variety of things, from teaching English to working in film production. And it was only in 2008 when my father got sick and we had a family business, and he said, could you come back and help me run it? So all of a sudden my life kind of turned upside down, and I found myself being thrust into a business, and maybe a business that I wasn't particularly passionate about now on reflection. And I had to learn the ropes really quickly about what that meant. After that, I launched Buy Rent Kenya, which was the first property portal in Kenya. We did 2 rounds of funding, and we got acquired in the end. So I exited that in 2017. And now my latest venture is property building. So I'm building some apartments in Riruta, 65 apartments in Riruta for low-medium housing.
So quite a few interesting things. So how many years is that? Like you said, 2008, and I was like, whoa, like 12 years or something. Like, that's a long time. So lots of
it is, but I feel things happen in waves, right? So when you think of time as a medium, and 12 years does seem long, but I think there's certain points where it's almost like time gets compressed. And I think COVID is one of those years where things happen so fast, it forces you to change quickly, and new things come out of it. So I think in a spectrum of time, in those 12 years, there's certain moments that are compressed faster, and more things happen in those periods.
It's true. Or accelerate or slow down. I guess a simple question would be, through all the business ventures you've done, and buy rent is very interesting because I feel like that's the famous one. I'm guessing a few people listening will immediately recognize. I still see the billboards now, and now that I know you, I have now emotional attachment to it. Even though you left, I sit and I'm like, yeah, buy rent. I mean, I think when we met, I'd mentioned I'm a customer, so I know that's one that is recognizable by a lot of people. So the question is, and through different ventures, through buy rent and everything else, what stands out to you as moments of, I don't know if I'd call it resilience. The word failure is very heavy, but we could call it that. So things that were tough or moments that were really tough. And when you think back, you're like, that one was one of the more difficult ones. Like, could you share a bit about that and possibly what that was like, or key lessons?
Specifically for buy rent Kenya, or just in general?
In general, could be the first time you jumped in, because I know people will relate to it in different ways. There's the first time struggles when you're new in business, and
Yeah.
then buy rent, which was your second, I guess, foray into it, but still must have had challenges. So whichever, like, it's an open, whatever comes to mind.
Sure. So the first thing that would come to mind is coming back in 2008. So like I said, at the time I was working in the film industry in New York. My father had got sick. He had asked me to come back and help out in the family restaurant. And I think I came back with a huge chip on my shoulder, right? So I came back here thinking I'm educated. I've got experience from around the world. I have a certain way of what I believe is the right way to do things, and I came in here with with too much arrogance, right? And I think my number one lesson is that every situation is different, and it's no matter what you have and what you prepare for, and I think that's good, but it's never going to be enough. It's really about understanding the situation you're in. It's about being present. It's really about understanding the unique problems that you're trying to solve. And I took it for granted at the time, but culture, right? Like culture in a company is huge, and you can't just come in and try to flip that round with what you believe is right. Like that is a process. So I think my first failure, or my first humbling experience was understanding that I'm not as great as I think I am in my mind. Like I think there was a lot I had to self-reflect to understand. How do I communicate better? How do I reach my team better? How do I lead better? And I think leadership is an underrated quality in entrepreneurship, but fundamentally the most important, because if you're not able to lead your team, it's very unlikely that you do great work. I think with buy rent Kenya, my biggest learning is probably about understanding to be the difference between being the favorite and the best. It's if you ask people what is the best, argument's sake, if you ask someone what's the best restaurant, there's a number of ways to do it. Would it be you go on a TripAdvisor? Would it be a ranking thing? Would it be, how would you determine it? Would it be like a bunch of critics? Would it be the number of awards? And it's very difficult to pinpoint. But you look at the restaurants that are successful, it's because they are someone's favorite restaurant. We all have a favorite restaurant because favorite creates an emotional attachment, right? It connects to the buyer. And at Buyer in Kenya, when we were there were other competitors with us, but for us it was really about saying, okay, let's focus on being the favorite. How do we get, or how do we create this attachment with people that they will always want to come back to us? Brian Chesky of Airbnb always said it really well. He says it's better to have 100 people that love you rather than a million people that sort of like you. So focusing on that 100 customers that absolutely love you and your product creates that emotion.
That's awesome. Wow. Yeah. And I'll remember that one as well. People in my
Yeah.
group will probably get a speech about that with the story. So thank you.
Yeah. And then I think the third lesson I've understood is, and this is from last year, and again, I think last year was very difficult for many people, and we all handled it differently. I think when I look back, perhaps I didn't handle it as well. I was on a course the other day, and someone asked me the question. He's like, in a situation like COVID, when it happened, you basically had three choices. One is you sit and you wait for it to pass. Number two is you throw in the towel and you realize whatever you had set up for is no longer going to work, and you say, okay, let me throw it in and move to something else. Or number three was you look at what you currently have, you realize it's not working, and you make the adjustments. And unfortunately for me, I think I was almost frozen with fear. in the first couple of months. I didn't understand. I didn't know how long it would be, but I wasn't proactive. So I didn't make any changes, and I just kind of was hoping this would pass. And like I say, the biggest waste you have in life is time. We all have the same amount of time. If I'm wasting my time, and if I lost 5 months there, that's the 5 months I never get back. And I think that was my big lesson of 2020.
So I'm glad you've gone into 2020, because that's a big part of this conversation. I'm hoping, and I know we need to encourage so many who had a tough time. And I'm actually very determined to have this conversation, because I think we need to talk about it. I think everybody jumped into 2021. It's like, oh my gosh, 2020 is done, moving on. But I'm such a believer in, we can learn so much if we're willing to stop and reflect and think about it. And so I'm glad you went there. So my question is, what exactly did happen? So you mentioned, yeah, you left Byron Kenya, I think you said 2017, which means you already, but I mean, you were still kept doing business. So I'm guessing there was still the restaurant, if I'm not wrong, and possibly the real estate. So in general, as an entrepreneur, what was the impact? Did you have to shut some things down? Like, what was that immediate, like, oh my gosh, the minute the lockdown happened for you and for your business?
Yeah, so I'll give some context. So after 2017, when I decided to refocus on the restaurant, my focus was to understand how do you fix the problem of low cost meals. So what we did was we had come up with a new brand called Foodie, which was really targeting lunch meals at around 300 to 500 shillings, right? That you would be able to order and get it delivered. And we had a very systematic approach where we were building satellite kitchens around Nairobi so that we were able to match demand with convenient delivery timing. Um, and we'd invested a lot. We had now moved to 3 locations, and we were testing. And of course, when you're doing it at that margin, it really becomes a volumes game. And of course, once COVID hit, and a lot of people, well, a lot of the offices have closed, the demand for food is no longer there, or at least that people would save their money and make food at home. But also, it also spawned a lot more competition, right? So you had now a lot of people, mom and pop shops, who are delivering food. And unfortunately for us, because we were a registered company and everything that we do is fully above board with taxes and stuff, it became a very difficult playing field for us to play in. Um, and we took a big hit. And like I said, I think my first, and then our main business, which was our restaurant, which was catering, which does catering for conferences, for exhibitions, for meetings, all those stopped. So all of a sudden, our revenue dropped by almost 95%, which was huge. And like I said, I was kind of like a deer stuck in headlights, not really understanding what to do, not really understanding how to make adjustments. There's some reasons I'm proud of. So one, I think there's a human part. I think there's a human part in all we do. I never think it's always about business. I think we always have to ask ourselves how we can do more for the people around us in our society. The easy thing would have been to say to all my staff, look, I'm sorry, can't do this, we're out. But I tried to, as much as I can, continue to pay salaries, at least to give something that people would be able to live on, because I understand these problems affected everybody. But I think my failure was I wasn't able to act quickly enough to pivot or to think or to change the business, to make it work. And I don't know why. Like, I think I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, I think it was a paralysis of fear, where fear just got the better of me. And then it was just hope beyond hope, where I was like, let's move things on. And I think that's an interesting lesson. I think there's always a difference between being proactive and being reactive, right? Living life by design and living life by circumstance. And I think I was the opposite. I was living life by circumstance. So what I turned into was fighting fires. Every day there's a fire to put out, and I'm fighting a fire, rather than saying to myself, how do I build an infrastructure so that the fire won't burn down the building? And I think that was a change in my mindset that didn't come early enough.
And you're not the only one. In fact, I'm listening to you, and it's so relatable. Because
Yeah.
even in my case, I think I thought I had, and then maybe eventually I did have a bounce back strategy, but it took a while. I think even for me, for 2-3 months there, a lot of us, I also think we shouldn't underrate the shock of the pandemic. Like, really, it's such an extraordinary situation we all found ourselves in, even in our personal lives. I think with worrying about the illness, the sickness, the pandemic itself. So there is the human side to things where, yeah, it's understandable. So maybe my question then is, at what point did you start to shift? At what point, because I know you are not stuck there, because even when we met, which was during Antler, that was interesting. I feel like maybe that was one decision already that you made, maybe one thing. I don't know if there was others, but yes. So which was that moment where you realized this, or or just at least started to make some moves, at least thought, okay, something has to give. I'm gonna try X, Y, and try to change things. Did you have that moment?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a moment of clarity, right? And I think the clarity is understanding what it is you want. So I think you're 100% right. I think the pandemic, while it taught us a lot of things that were, affect us negative ways, there were also a lot of positive things, right? So I got to spend time with my family. I got to realign my priorities. My relationship with my wife became strong, like all these kinds of things, because we were spending more time. And I think throughout the year, as that process went on, I started to realign. I started to rethink about what am I passionate about? What do I want to do? And then I kind of realized there's certain elements in my life or certain businesses that maybe I'm not passionate about. And maybe that's why I wasn't able to shift, or maybe that's why I wasn't able to move forward, because sometimes it's an intrinsic mental block that's stopping you from doing it, because it almost feels like it's too much work, or you lack the work to do it. I was listening to a podcast the other day. It's the anniversary of Kobe Bryant's death, and Kobe Bryant was talking about like how if you have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you hate doing it, then you need to find another job, because your work shouldn't be that difficult for you to stomach. You need to have that passion, what you love to do. And I think throughout that year, or towards the end of that year, it almost became a path of self-discovery, and almost a path that I'm still on now, trying to understand what is my purpose, what is my passion, how do I engage myself positively to redefine myself in what I want to be able to do.
Any tools or books? Because I don't know, I noticed you and I are a lot alike in the sense of we both love personal growth. And I think that's a big thing also that could help a lot of people. I talk about it. So listening to you, I'm thinking, and knowing you,
Yeah.
I think there's always some interesting things. You're open-minded. You just talked about taking a course a few minutes back, which means there's a few things that you've done or continue to do, even for your own shift, like you said. Is there anything you can think of that you might recommend, even if it's a book, something that you were like, wow, this one helped, or this one I would definitely recommend to others out there who are in the same space or trying to figure all this out,
So, gosh, I've read I read a lot of books last year. I think we had a lot of time to read. I read a lot of books last year. There's a book by Ken Robinson which I really enjoyed. Think Like a Monk, which I really enjoyed. But then also, there's some amazing autobiographies that I read, like where the story or the message is not as clear cut or academic, but it's through that person's journey. Right now, I'm reading Andre Agassi. He's a ex-tennis player, and his autobiography is called Open, and it's like one of the best autobiographies I've read from an athlete. And just understanding his struggle, and like how he hated the sport and what he had to go through to become the best at it. But I think with all of these, there's a common theme in it for me, and the first is almost personal reflection and discipline, right? So one of my mentors had taught me a while back about what is the first things you do in the morning about getting your mind set and then getting your body prepared. And so I have a very strict routine, and I can feel it when I'm not doing my morning routine. I feel out of sync, but I feel when I am doing it, it helps me have that clarity to take on that day, that grounding of gratitude, to understand that I'm still in a very fortunate position. It just allows me to handle stress better. It allows me to think through and a little bit more long term. And again, to move to this concept of not always fighting fires, but kind of living your life by with a little bit more design.
Yeah. So what's your morning routine? I was waiting to hear like what does your morning, so what are some of those things that you do?
Sure.
To try them out.
Yeah, sure. So I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is my favorite.
Like
Every day. Every day. That's my favorite time. My kids are asleep. My wife is asleep. That's my favorite time. It's still dark out. People have different cycles. I'm not saying it's for everyone. I know some people work better at 2 o'clock in the morning. I work very badly at night. At the end of the day, I work very well in the morning. But it starts with I wake up. I do 10 minutes of gratitude. I write into my journal about what my thoughts are, what am I feeling, what am I thinking. I do meditation, and then I do some reading. I try to do some positive reading in the morning. So either a great speech or an inspirational article. I try not to read the news. I try not to look at my phone. I try to just prepare my mind for the day and to use that to ground me for my start. And then I will try to go and do some exercise for half an hour. So that's by now 6:30. My kids are waking up, and now we go through the whole routine of getting them ready for school, getting them breakfast, and then getting out the door. And like I say, it's not easy. And every morning, on those days where you don't want to get up, I always say to myself, if it was easy, everybody would do it. It's not supposed to be easy for a reason, and that's what you have to push yourself to do. But like I said, when I don't do it, I feel lost. I feel frazzled during the day. So it's almost like this habit becomes very necessary for me to be able to push through.
Cool. All right. So just quick thoughts around key lessons. Well, I have you here. I think there's a lot, like even when I've known you, I start, and being a bit, I guess, in my tech startup journey, like where you are with Byron Kenya at some point, similar sort of tech startup, trying to build a business. There's been some good nuggets I've gotten to learn from you, and knowing that probably a lot of this audience is going to be similar people who are running tech startups. Maybe you could share some of your insights, from your journey at Byron, right? Including that whole idea of exit. Because I'm usually in conversation and like, I don't even know if many of us either think about it or almost the view we have when we're, like even for me with ZD, it's very interesting to think about, much as I'm passionate about it. Where is the business going, and is there going to be a point where it's time for me to move on to the next thing, or maybe that's the smart thing to do? And of course, you've shared with me a couple of reasons and thoughts and stories around why, when it was time to exit, you exited. But yeah, I think there's a couple of, sort of open lessons or tips. If you were giving tips to any techpreneur or anybody doing the tech startup kind of a business similar to Virent, what are some of the things you'd want to share just from your own experience, including talking a little bit about the exit strategy or exiting,
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question. And I wish I knew some of this stuff earlier.
Yeah.
I think the key thing is always having clarity, right? Like, and understanding what you are doing and why you are doing it and how long you want to be doing it for. And the how long is really fits into your why. So if your why is always there to, if you're in buy rent houses to help people find property and so on and so forth. So, like at some point I never came into the business thinking, oh, we're going to sell or we're going to IPO or whatever. Like I just kind of felt like focus on what it is you're trying to solve, and those decisions will come up as they go along. I think there's two things, and my first one was at Byron Kenya. Yeah, we went into we raised money and we took it, and it changed very much the nature of the business. I know you and I have spoken about it, like the difference between building a high growth business and building a profitable business, and understanding the two and what it means to you as an individual based on your alignment of what you were trying to do. At Byron Kenya, it made sense because of what we had to achieve. It needed to be growth, especially when you look at a classifieds model. Like it needs to be a very dominant player, and so it needs to be a very high growth player. The second is understanding your capabilities, and I think we see this with a lot of tech companies that go onto that stage when they pass growth, and now the structure needs to come in, the infrastructure needs to come in, and we're different CEOs and we're different people for different parts of that journey, both in terms of a skill set, in terms of what we bring to the table. So someone who's really good at growing a 5-person company to 100 is very different from someone who's going to grow it from 100 to 1,000, just in terms of their mindset, in terms of their experience, in terms of their skill. So understanding what the company needs and are you the right person? It's always asking yourself, are you the right person for this job? From there. And then I would say the second part is again aligned to your passion. To all the entrepreneurs listening out there, we all know how draining this can be, how difficult it can be, and how many late nights, how many early mornings, how much stress you go through. And at some point, it's fine for all of us to say, look, we've burnt out, or the passion is not there anymore, or we're not getting that buzz. Some people get that buzz, and when things slow down, they don't get that buzz. And I always think it comes back to what I was talking about earlier. It's understanding where's the passion that lies in with you, and how does that connect to your business. When we think about exit strategy, I think it's important to understand, one, how do you want to exit? Who's gonna come in? and what does it look like to them? So every company will have a certain amount of metrics that they would need to do, whether it's revenue, whether it's number of users, whether it's repeat customers, whichever it is. But it's being really sure that you understand what it is, and understanding the person that you're pitching it to, that's important to them, that it weaves into the overall story of how it is. And sometimes that's probably the hardest thing to do, to understand. I think in the early stage, it's really about product fit, but then after that, it's really understanding, well, is it scalable? And once it's scalable, then it becomes a very different proposal, different situation.
Wow, that's awesome. And I love what you said about the passion, because I get that. Like, I've had founders also who said it just started to feel like they hated their own. It's funny because we assume just because you founded something, you're gonna love it forever. But that thing could also be the thing that was the job you hated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't hate Byron Kenya, but I didn't find it on purpose. Like, it was almost an accident. It was the year I was getting married, and my co-founder had come. He's a friend of mine from university. He lives in Mauritius. He'd come to Kenya, and we were talking about property. And he said, "How do people? I'm interested in property here. What can we do?" And I was like, "All right, let's go buy some magazines." He's like, "What? There's no website?" And I'm like, "No, there's no website." And we were sitting at Art Cafe, I remember, at Village Market, and he's like, "We should start a website." So we literally just started brainstorming and thinking about it. And in my naivety, I thought, hey, that's a great idea, but it'll run itself. I don't need to do this. Like, we'll build a website and people will use it. Like I'm doing a
The
free
fantasy of the
yeah.
holiday kind of a startup that can run itself. I don't know if any exists.
Exactly. And then you started to find, and then it just took off, and it became big. There's a really interesting thing about passion. And a friend of mine told me this a couple of months ago, and I'm still processing it, right? So he said, you might not be passionate about the business you are doing, like in totality, but if you can find parts of it where you are passionate about, that's also a way to keep you going. Because of course, if we say, hey, I'm only passionate about playing football, and that's what I want to do, but if I'm no good, like, everything else is going to sound like rubbish, right? But he was talking about, maybe you're not passionate, and I'll give you my example. Maybe you're not passionate about catering, or you're not passionate about food, but perhaps you're passionate about elevating people. So you're passionate about coaching. You're passionate about building company culture, and those are things you can do within the organization from where it is. But it's also understanding where how best you fit into the overall part, which I thought was an interesting take.
No, it is. I'm going to marinate on that as well. But yeah, those are still have been some of the more interesting conversations we've had. So just as we wind it down, lots of juicy, good nuggets. And thank you for sharing so openly. I guess the last one I would say is that's 2021, the bounce back strategy. Everybody's like, okay, it's time to retaliate. Whatever happened last year, we're all forging a new path. So what's your bounce back strategy? What would you say? What's 2021 looking like for you? And any final thoughts or words around bouncing back, coming back from where we were and sort of forging this new positive path as we, I guess, rebuild in 2021?
Yeah, so I think my bounce back strategy for 2021, I'm very clear about what I want to do in the restaurant. So it's really about making those milestones to be able to achieve it. I'm very focused on the property development. I genuinely believe, I'm not saying it because it's mine, I genuinely believe this is it's a phenomenal opportunity of investment. And like I said, there's no shortcuts taken here. And given my buy rent experience, we spent years studying this market, understanding it. Like I said, I think the opportunity that it's presenting is phenomenal. And I really want to be able to finish that and to deliver a high quality product there. And then the third is just working on myself. As I said to you earlier, I just turned 40, which I'm very excited about. But it's almost 40 is one of those milestone years where it gives you time to reflect. It gives you time to reflect on yourself. And so a lot of my reflection is around, what have I achieved? What do I want to do? How do I want to be better as a person? So I think those are the things that be able to come in. My discipline and consistency to improve on who I am and what I can do.
Cool. Thank you, Jamie. And thank you for being willing to share and talk to me. It's been awesome. I mean, even without the podcast, people should, I just love talking. It's like a thing. But now I'm glad. It's like, I feel like I'm letting people into our private conversation, which is
Absolutely.
fun. So thanks again. And yeah, I'll definitely share this once it's done, but we're excited and looking forward to where you are. Maybe we'll do a sort of end of 2021 check back
Yeah.
of how that bounce back strategy worked, right? But thanks so much for
And
the conversation.
thank you for the opportunity. And I want to say thank you to you. You know, you're someone, like I say, we met a few months ago, but you inspire me just with the energy that you bring. And I love, yeah, you know, you like, I think you're one of the people who made me rethink about my year and what it was ending, and like just that determination to push through. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thanks, Jamie. Cool.
This week's episode has come to an end, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, head over right now to Twitter and Facebook and like and share, comment, get involved. Let us know what you think, what you want to learn next, and join us next time.